What's up everybody, I'm HoopsandHipHop and welcome back to another video on the best cut content from every Pokemon generation. Now we haven't been doing this series for a few weeks because of all the Sword and Shield news, but I am ready to bring it back today, and in today's video we are going to be highlighting content from the 5th generation featured in the Unova region. Now as I'm sure you probably know, this generation of Pokemon is very notable for both good and bad reasons. It offered this unique perspective of only being able to use Pokemon from that specific generation during the main story, and the Pokemon designs themselves are also pretty divisive amongst the fan base as well. With that being said, however, Unova still has a bunch of cut content that everyone can enjoy regardless of whether or not you're a Gen 5 fan, and that's exactly what we're going to be highlighting in today's video. There is a little bit of everything, including stuff we just barely became aware of within the last month or so this video is going to be very exciting to say the least, and I hope you guys are excited as well. So without any further ado, why don't we go ahead and get into it. Okay, first up, we're actually going to be talking about some Pokemon, believe it or not. During the release period of these games, the Japanese magazine Nintendo Dream actually conducted a series of interviews with Ken Sugimori, the art director for the franchise, where he gave a ton of details about a bunch of different Unova Pokemon, including talking about how their design changed from their beta stages to the final, and he even talked about some Pokemon that were cut altogether. Even though these interviews are several years old at this point, they have only been recently translated into English thanks to the help of fellow content creator Dr. Lava. So I am going to link his website in the description below where you can check out this whole interview in full if you would like, and he also has a YouTube channel, so full credit for the translation of this goes to him. As I said though, these interviews detailed the development of a bunch of different Pokemon designs, and I am going to start off by discussing Tornadus and Thundurus. In the interview, Ken Sugimori stated that originally Tornadus and Thundurus were actually going to be red and blue as opposed to green and blue. However, this caused a bit of confusion because this made them look too similar to Sock and Throw. So as a result, in order to differentiate these Pokemon, Ken Sugimori stated that Sock and Throw, who originally had horns at this time, were given the eyebrows that they now have instead in order to make them look a bit distinctive and unique compared to Tornadus and Thundurus. And then Tornadus, who was presumably the red Pokemon of the two, was converted from a red color to a green color in order to further differentiate these two groups of Pokemon. And another very interesting thing about Throw in particular that is also stated by Sugimori in these interviews actually goes all the way back to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, because he states a very rough design for Throw as a Pokemon was actually considered for Diamond and Pearl but didn't make it into the game. So during the development of Pokemon Black and White, Sugimori brought back that design, polished it up, and it ultimately made it into Gen 5, becoming the Pokemon we now know today as Throw. So this has a little bit of cut content relating to Gen 4 as well as Gen 5, and I personally think that is unbelievably fascinating. Another group of Pokemon discussed in these interviews that we've actually known about for a little while is the Hydreigon family. According to Sugimori, originally the Hydreigon family were actually dragons based around tanks before they got the designs that we ultimately know today. Sugimori states in the interview that originally these Pokemon were based around tanks, but they didn't really like where the designs were going, so they decided to kind of put them off to the side and possibly come back to them later. But then when later came around and they needed a powerful 3-stage dragon line, they brought these Pokemon back and redesigned them into what we know today. However, the original tank inspiration for these Pokemon was not completely forgotten, as the tread patterns that you can see on Zweilous and Hydreigon's body are actually a remnant of this army tank inspiration. And Sugimori even goes so far as to say that amongst the different colors that were represented in the Pokedex at the time, purple was one that he decided to pick for the color of these treads because it wasn't seen very often in the Pokedex. So that really just goes to show you how much is considered when designing every individual Pokemon. Now is where it gets really interesting, because this is where we actually get to talk about a couple of Pokemon that were cut altogether from these games. And the first one is actually a tiny ant Pokemon. In the interview when Sugimori is talking about Durant and Heatmor and the relationship between the two, he discusses the fact that Game Freak has really wanted to make an ant Pokemon that is literally the tiniest Pokemon in existence, and they've wanted to do it for a long time. They considered it for these games, but when the idea of Durant came up, they decided to focus on Durant as its own thing, and ultimately had to hold back the idea of this tiny ant Pokemon from the game. And obviously we haven't seen it since, so it'll be interesting to see if this design ever comes back, considering Sugimori stated that it's something that they've wanted to do for a long time. Another Pokemon that was cut from these games, according to Sugimori, is the third stage of the Petilil and Lilligant family. In these interviews, Sugimori states that Petilil and Lilligant were originally going to be a 3-stage evolutionary line as opposed to 2. He does not specify which stage of this line was cut, so it could be the pre-evolution to Lilligant, the evolution to Lilligant, or even the pre-evolution to Petilil, but just knowing that there was a Pokemon there that got cut altogether, making these two Pokemon a 2-stage as opposed to a 3-stage line, is fascinating, even if we don't have any other details. Okay, now this next one is really interesting because it actually has to do with the abomination that is Stunfisk. Originally, according to Sugimori, Stunfisk was very different than it ended up in the final game, because originally it was actually based on a goosefish as opposed to a flounder, was actually primarily blue in color, and was water electric type as opposed to ground electric. But due to them needing to balance the game out a little more, Stunfisk's type was changed to ground electric, which subsequently changed his design, and we got the really ugly looking thing we have today. Next up is the fact that originally Frillish and Jellicent were not ghost types at all, and it was only due to the balancing phase of development, which was what changed Stunfisk to ground electric, that Ghost was added to their typing as well. And another interesting thing about this that Sugimori notes is that the designer who created Frillish and Jellicent was actually notably disappointed when they had to add the ghost typing to their two Pokemon. One interesting thing that Sugimori notes about Sawsbuck is that Sawsbuck was actually created before the idea of seasons was implemented into the game, which obviously changes its forms. Now, even though this isn't really considered cut content, one thing about Sawsbuck that we can kind of consider cut content is its very early beta design, which we actually have access to. You can clearly tell here that it is a very, very primitive design, but it's still fascinating to see nonetheless. Another set of Pokemon that were edited heavily from their beta design to their final release are Dwebble and Crustle, because originally Dwebble and Crustle were both going to be the furnace Pokemon, quote unquote, and their shells were supposed to be made out of pottery, and likely could have even been fire type given their species name, the furnace Pokemon. Sugimori stated in the interview that the reason why they decided to change this design is because they wanted to give the shells of Dwebble and Crustle sharper angles, and they believed the original designs just looked slow and awkward. Next up, we actually get to talk about another cut Pokemon, and that would actually be a Flame Pokemon that was originally supposed to be the starting stage of the Litwick family. Sugimori states when he's talking about the Litwick line that originally this line was going to start as a Flame Pokemon and then evolve into a Candle Pokemon and then finally a Lamp, but they had some complications evolving the Flame into a Candle, so they just decided to start with the Candle and progress from there. Based on the way that Sugimori talks about them trying to make the Flame evolving into a Candle work, I would suspect that there is some kind of concept art or beta design for this Flame Pokemon outside of just the general idea, and even though we don't have access to it or any kind of information about it outside of this interview, it's still just absolutely fascinating to think about. Another Pokemon that was cut from Black and White was a Snail Pokemon. According to Ken Sugimori, when they were developing Carablast and Shelmet, there was actually another snail Pokemon that was going to be Carablast's original rival instead of Shelmet, because originally Shelmet was being developed independently of Carablast and this other snail Pokemon, and this other snail Pokemon was going to take on the role of quote-unquote being eaten by Carablast, according to Sugimori. However, as they continued to develop Carablast and its evolution, Escavalier, they came up with the idea of Escavalier wearing armor and thought it would be really cool if they had it wear the armor of another Pokemon, and that's where Shelmet came into play. And once the idea of Shelmet and Carablast being paired together was put into play, that unfortunately meant that the original snail Pokemon that was originally Carablast's rival got the short end of the stick. And the final Pokemon we are going to be talking about in this video is Sigilyph. Now, Sigilyph is a very unique looking Pokemon that definitely makes an impression on you when you see it for the first time. But according to Ken Sugimori, its original design was really intense. He says, and I quote, "Sigilyph's final design still makes a pretty strong impression, but the initial design was really intense." He doesn't give any more detail outside of this, but given that Sigilyph's final design still looks really intense, I can only imagine what this even more intense version of Sigilyph could have looked like. And hearing all of these details about what all of these Pokemon were originally like just has me foaming at the mouth wanting to see some kind of concept art, because the development process for Pokemon games, and the Pokemon themselves in particular, is just so cool, and I hope that one day we will actually get to see these beta designs. Okay, now we are going to get into some other details of the Black and White games that don't relate to Pokemon or cut Pokemon, but are still really cool. And we're going to start off with the fact that originally Unova very likely was intended to have a different name than it ended up with in the final. This is because some retailers in the UK who were advertising pre-release box art for the games used the name Alios to refer to the region as opposed to Unova. This leads me to believe that Alios was the original name for the Unova region, and Unova was changed to the official name very late in development, to the point that pre-release box art with the Alios name was even made before they ended up changing the name. As far as I can tell though, this name for Unova has only appeared in the United Kingdom, which could mean that it's just a regional difference, but considering that English is the main language of the UK anyway, I highly doubt that, meaning that Alios was probably going to be the name for the 5th generation region. And if I do say so myself, I actually like the name Alios just a little bit more than Unova. A pretty small but interesting fact about the mystery gift feature in Black and White is that there is various placeholder text within the game that covers various mystery gifts for as far into the future as the year 2020 being compatible with Generation 5. Now, it's unknown if mystery gifts for Generation 5 and Pokemon Black and White were going to be planned that far into the future. It's very likely that's not the case, and those were just, once again, placeholders just in case they decided to do that. But considering these games came out in 2010 and 11 respectively, depending on the region, is absolutely insane to say the least. There is also an unused item in the games that is known as the Godstone. Now, there is hardly any detail about it at all in the games other than the fact that it's a rare stone, but given its resemblance to the Lightstone and Darkstone that are associated with Reshiram and Zekrom, it's very likely that this was going to be used in a similar fashion with Qrem, which could have affected the plot because, as we know, Qrem does not come out of any stone and just resides within the giant chasm. It's also possible that this stone was going to be used in the hypothetical Pokemon Gray, but then either the plans for that game changed and eventually became Black and White 2, or the plot for Black and White 2 as a whole changed as well, and the idea for the Godstone was scrapped altogether. One interesting thing about the mythical Pokemon Meloetta is that Meloetta in Pokemon Black and White is programmed to have a star piece as a held item 100% of the time when you catch it in the wild. However, Meloetta is not catchable in the wild because it can only be obtained through events, which means this implies that Meloetta was originally planned to be catchable in the wild before its event was changed. If this was in fact the case, this tells me that originally there was an event planned for Meloetta, just like various other Pokemon, specifically in Gen 4, but then they decided to go the new standard route by just giving you the Pokemon, which if true is honestly a shame because obviously we prefer to catch the Pokemon as opposed to being given them. And to round off the video, we're actually going to be talking about a couple things that were cut from Black and White 2. Starting with the Pokestar Studios, there are actually shiny versions of several of the Pokestar Studios opponents that are programmed into the game and can be found within the game's files. This would obviously imply that you were able to shiny hunt these characters just like you can Pokemon, however it isn't possible to encounter these shiny versions of these characters in the final game. And last but certainly not least, within the data of Pokemon Black and White 2, there are several text strings that confirm that originally Hilbert and Hilda, the player characters of Black and White 1, were going to appear in the Pokemon World Tournament as opponents. In the final game, Hilbert and Hilda do not appear at all outside of connecting to Black and White 1 for some type of multiplayer functionality, but they are referred to frequently within the story, so it would have been awesome to see them make an appearance in the World Tournament, and that honestly would have been the icing on the cake to an already fantastic game. And there we have it, everybody. That was the best cut content from the 5th generation of Pokemon. Now, regardless of whether or not you hate or love the Generation 5 games, I don't think you can deny as a Pokemon fan that this stuff is extremely fascinating, and I just love to get into the depths of the development of Pokemon games, especially when it involves Pokemon designs, because I love hearing about the development process of Pokemon and the games themselves, so I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. If you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you're new for new Pokemon content every single week. Also, be sure to let me know in the comments below which one of these pieces of cut content is your favorite and which one you would have liked to have seen make the final release. As always, if you'd like to support the channel more as well, you can check me out on Spotify, give some of my Pokemon remixes a listen there, and I'm actually going to have a brand new one out tomorrow that will be out on all major platforms including Spotify, iTunes, and Apple Music, Google Play, and obviously YouTube, and any and all support you guys could give me on that would be very much appreciated. It's a Sword and Shield remix, so I'm super excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. With all that being said though, I'll be back with another regular video after the remix on Tuesday, so be sure to hit that notification bell if you haven't yet to be notified when it goes live, and as always, I love you guys very much, and until the next one, I'll smell you guys later.